of carbon markets in Pakistan. So my name is Ubaid, and I'll be moderating the discussion as it goes forward. And we're really looking forward. I mean, we'll be discussing some of the very key developments that are about to happen, and we really look forward to some very strong recommendations coming in from your end. But let me, before going to anything technical, let me very quickly start with the very quick introduction of the agenda and some of the housekeeping rules. So we'll be going in two sessions. Initially, we'll be having a plenary in which we have very pleased to have been joined by His Excellency, the Ambassador Jakob Linnerf, the Ambassador of Denmark to Pakistan, Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, the Executive Director of SDPI, Dr. Sajid. And after that, we'll have a very quick introductory presentation on carbon taxation from Dr. Khalid, who's currently working as a research fellow at SDPI. And after that, we'll be going more towards a roundtable format where we have a lot of the structured questionnaires, but there's an ample time for the Q&A, the discussions, and really look forward to having some very strong recommendations going in. As for the quick housekeeping rules, the event is being live streamed on YouTube, X, Facebook, as well as LinkedIn pages of SDPI. It will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You're all welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it within your networks as well. For two of our online speakers, we request you to kindly switch on your cameras while you're speaking, as long as your network allows that to do so without any disruptions. And both from our distinguished experts who have joined us in person as well as those who are joining us online, feel free, we have ample time for the question, but for the online participant, you can also drop any of your questions in the Q&A or the chat box that is appearing on the Zoom, and we'll be picking it right from there. So with this, let me initially invite Dr. Sajid Amin Javed, the Deputy Executive Director Research of SDPI, for an official opening and welcome remarks. So Dr. Sajid, if you can please join us.
Glad I'm here.
Okay. Thank you.
I changed the seat. Thank you so much, Obed. And let me join Obed in welcoming Honorable His Excellency, our Ambassador of Denmark, and all the guests around the table and on the back side of the table to join us. I think there is no doubt that climate change is a macroeconomic risk. Not only the environment risk. And macroeconomic policy framework for any country need to integrate climate change into it. This is what SDPI calls climate in all and all in climate approach that we need to go. And I'll just making 2 points here and looking forward for the discussion. We have to see carbon taxation in a whole broader perspective, the economic perspective that we have and the environmental perspective. And I think this will be very critical to see from this August audience here. What should be the more focus, because they have implication. Is carbon taxation coming from environmental perspective or as a revenue tool maximization? Because in Pakistan, unfortunately, whenever you call taxation, the focus shifts on short-run revenue maximization, and that we see. And in that kind, I think it really seeds ineffectiveness of the policies. We see it in tobacco taxation and some other taxation. While there is a discussion that we need to increase tax, the government discussion is that we need to decrease tax to boost economic activity and raise some revenues. So I think this will be one important question that I'll be leaving. How the government should see carbon taxation from a macroeconomic perspective, from an environmental perspective, or a blend of both, and what are the implications for the government. Number two, I think that's again a caution that while there is no sort of disagreement that countries have to go for carbon taxation, as I said, that this is a macroeconomic risk and macro policies, not only the fiscal policy, I mean, the central banks in the world even are now monetary policy has become being climate sensitive. But what should be the starting point? I think we have seen many good measures ending in fail if implemented without preparedness. Real estate sector, we have retailer tax, we have all this one. So I think the second question that I'll be leaving, and I'm sure Obed has many more questions, that what would be the starting point? What are the key sectors that can be taken as a priority sector for taxation to begin with? And finally, a proposal. Budget making is in process. I think the government should start discussions around if it is going for carbon levy. This is the right time to begin with, because now it's coming as an IMF condition for the program, and it should not come as a surprise. Because if you are bringing it as a surprise, you are seeding a failure actually. So I think this forum is the beginning on the discussions on carbon taxation, including carbon levy. I once again welcome all of you, and I look forward for the discussion. Back to you, Obed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sajid, for setting a brief scene. And I believe, again, very bright what Dr. Sajid has mentioned, that one of the very reasons that we actually decided to have this dialogue was some of the very recent developments that have happened. Dr. Sajid has highlighted the recent discussions that are happening. We all know that we are under an IMF program. So what's going on there as well? Secondly, I believe definitely the budget is due, and one of the very key outcomes that we sort of envision coming from this dialogue is sort of the inputs, recommendations that can actually be guide that development process as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Sajid, for setting the scene. And yes, as we go forward, we'll also sort of mention some of the very key and pertinent questions that we would actually like from distinguished experts to get it to respond to as well. But before that, let's go towards our plenary session, and let me sort of invite Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, the Executive Director of Sustainable Development Policy Institute, and also an advisor at the Asia Development Bank Institute as well, for his keynote address. So yeah, Dr. Abid, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Obed. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's really heartening to see so many of like-minded people in this room in this Ramzan afternoon. That signifies the importance of the topic, and that signifies the knowledge sharing opportunity that all of us are here to avail. Let me start by thanking Excellency Jacob Lenoff, Ambassador of Denmark to Pakistan, for Denmark's continued support, both in terms of knowledge sharing, but as well as the financial support to keep this agenda going on carbon taxation, on carbon markets. Last year, when we started this work, we were talking of carbon markets. We also talked of CBAM and how will it impact different developing countries. And this year, incidentally, in the run-up to budget, we can see that the carbon taxation and carbon levy that is being talked of, and Sajid has already talked about it. Now, any policy tool or policy instrument like carbon taxation, it has its pros, it has its cons, and today's consultation and discussion is to explore both the pros and cons of it, try to understand what are the opportunities in this proposal, and where are the flip sides. And I repeat at the cost of repetition, something that I keep on saying, that public policies, they are neither good nor bad. All good public policies, they have some bad elements, and the worst public policy, they would benefit someone. That's why they are there. So in this discussion, we are just trying to see that how we can maximize the beneficiaries of any policy tool. And in this instance, we are talking of carbon taxation. Now, if I look at it from a CBAM perspective, and as we have been discussing in these sessions before, that from 1st of January 2026, when CBAM it's fully functional, many of the sectors, right now there are 6, and fortunately Pakistan doesn't get affected much by virtue of our export composition. But from 1st of January 2026, many other sectors, they would be brought in under this CBAM, which the simplest, if I can simplify the policy, it is that any product whereby the carbon emission exceeds EU's permissible carbon emission level would be subject to some sort of levy or tax, which is the CBAM. Now, we are already living in an era of tariff war. After the political change in United States, one can see the whole swath of tariffs and counter tariffs. And within this, this CBAM in EU and then perhaps in United States and in China and in many other countries, that would make it compulsory for organizations and industries and producers and manufacturers to start measuring their carbon emission in order to determine whether those emissions, and these emissions are across supply chain, whether those emissions are lower than the permissible emission level in their export destination country. And if not, in EU right now, either these export, they will be subject to some sort of carbon tax in EU, or that carbon tax need to be paid in the country of origin. So if Pakistani exporter, if they are paying carbon tax in Pakistan in rupees, they can actually save their carbon tax that they have to pay in EU in euros. And that is one side of this proposal that is being presented, that from January 2026 onwards, many of the private sector manufacturer and producer, they would have to pay carbon tax in any way. Either they can pay in euros in EU, or they can pay in rupees in Pakistan. The second part of it, which Sajid alluded to, is the revenue. Pakistan is facing this revenue shortfall, although according to the information, Ministry of Finance and IMF, they have agreed to revising down the revenue collection target from 12.9 trillion rupees to 12.3 trillion rupees. But of course, in the next fiscal year, this gap has to be filled in some way. And one way of fetching more revenue is carbon tax, which can be applied on combustion engine, which means that the vehicle registration that can be slightly expensive depending on their engine capacity size, or it can be applied as a carbon levy on fuel, diesel and petrol, which would mean that some of the benefit of this lower fuel prices in international market, those can be actually then curtailed through carbon levy. And I'm fine with both proposals as long as we could ring fence this carbon tax for climate adaptation or climate mitigation measures. So I don't mind paying carbon tax on my fuel consumption or on my vehicle size if I know that whatever I pay is actually ring fenced, and then government comes with some tangible proposal that the tax collected, it would be spent on climate change adaptation measures, it would be spent on climate change mitigation measures. If that is not the case, then of course there will be many ifs and buts. The benefit of this tax would still remain there, that the benefit is that our producers and our manufacturers, they will, if they are paying carbon tax in Pakistan, they will not have to pay carbon tax in EU, that they will be asked to pay up from 1st January 2026. But I need to maximize its benefit, and I need to see that whatever I pay, that goes for climate. If I'm paying tax for the sake of paying tax, that is a different matter. That can go to the budgetary spending measure. But if I'm paying carbon tax to green my country and to offset my carbon footprint, then I would like to see it being spent on some green measures. And I think one of the recommendations that should come from this forum for this, as it's a pre-budget seminar, that if government plans to apply this tax, then government should also come up with some sort of counter expenditure measure, whereby it would be spent on greening the environment, it would be spent on greening our economy and greening our industry. And besides this, of course, now we have functional carbon markets as well. In January 2025, government has already now shared the carbon market policy, and we know that now we have the nodal points, we have the roles and responsibilities, what needs to be done by provinces, what needs to be done by federal government, who can actually float carbon credits, who can sell and who can buy carbon credits. And that would be another way of actually getting prepared for CBAM. And that would work both in the country of origin as well as in the country of export. So the importer, they can actually offset the carbon footprint by buying carbon credits, importer in issue, and the exporters in Pakistan, they can offset their carbon footprints by buying carbon credits. And now government of Pakistan has given this mechanism, and I think that is another area that needs to be discussed, how we can maximize this opportunity and this window of offsetting the carbon emission. So I think these are the broader contours of today's discussion, and I look forward to learning more from the relevant experts who are here. Thank you, Beth, and the team at GPI for organizing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Abid. So yeah, just to very quickly summarize, that's again the scene that we actually want to build. So, I mean, the goal today is not just to sort of declare carbon taxation or market mechanisms or just to debate on that in very isolation, but also to see how it all sort of fits into the broader economic roadmap of Pakistan. So yeah, it's again not about just penalizing it's more about future proofing of our industries under the CBAM regime that Dr. Abid just recently highlighted as well. And especially, I think one really good point is definitely, along with others, is what's the good way of, again, spending them. That's actually going to count if you talk about the social side of this as well. So how any of the such levies can be structured to balance the fiscal needs with an economic growth and climate action plan. That's really important. So with this, I believe we'll be going towards a special remarks from His Excellency Ambassador Jakob Linef. And if I can just request His Excellency that for keynote, if it's okay, if you can please come at the podium, if that's okay for you. So thank you so much once again. And it's always a pleasure working with the Embassy of Denmark here as well. So over to you.
Actually, I was just thinking that I should request to come up here. Not because I like the company down there, but it's always nice to be able to see the full group of people and say a proper good afternoon to you all. I have been there before, and it's always a pleasure to join SDPI's events. I'm always a little bit nervous when I have to speak after Dr. Soleri, because these deep insights and knowledge that the doctor has into the sector and to the business and so on I cannot really compete with that. So that's why I get a little bit nervous. But on the other hand, I feel very safe here, because I know that in this room, we are united in the fight against climate change. And I feel, at home among not freedom fighters, but fighters against climate change. So that gives me enough comfort to speak after Dr. Soleri. Yeah. Ramadan Mubarak to you all. I know we are approaching this time of day where it's a little bit tricky for fasters, but thank you for joining us anyway. And it's a special time It's a time of one side a bit of quietness because of the Ramadan season, but it's also a time of a lot of turbulence in the world and on the global scene. So on one side, some quietness, sometimes on the other hand, a bit of turbulence. But there are a few constants, and at least here in Pakistan, there are two constants. And one constant is that climate change is a fundamental threat for all of us, for our societies, for Pakistan. And that's a threat that requires our utmost and most acute attention and action. So that's the one constant. And the other constant is that SDBI is here, and you are our guiding star, and you are our experts to help us and to guide us and to guide the companies, the private people in Pakistan, but not least the government here, to implement the right measures and take the right moves in order to advance the fight against climate change. So thank you once again, SDPI, for the immense effort that you are doing. It's very, very impressive, and it's very, very important for Pakistan. We from Denmark. Someone wants to enter. We from Denmark, we are super proud to be one of the key partners to SDPI. We have been that for a few years now, and we have just entered 2025 with a new framework that will guide us to our partnership throughout the year. And sometimes people will ask me, why is Denmark partnering up with SDPI? Why are we, spending Danish taxpayers' money on working with SDPI? Well, obviously, because SDPI is doing a fantastic and very, very important job. But it's also because the Danish government and Pakistan's government, we are both committed to work together in a close partnership to bring upon a greener Pakistan. And what Denmark brings into this partnership is 50 years of experiences in transforming a society based on coal and oil. Someone needs to be rescued. Can we continue? Yeah. Okay, I hope the person is safe. All safe? Yes. What? So okay. Yeah. So what Denmark brings into this partnership with Pakistan's government is 50 years of transforming our society from a society based on coal and oil into a society practically completely based on renewable energy, wind, biomass, water, and solar. And it's taking us 50 years to transform our society. We have learned a lot. We have been challenged a lot. We also made a few mistakes here and there. And there's no reason for Pakistan to, copy those mistakes. So we are here, we are ready, and we are in any way ready to give those advices that Pakistan would need from us to transform Pakistan into a more greener society. What have we learned throughout the 50 years? Well, we have learned that it is possible to go from coal and oil to clean energy. It is possible. And it's possible in Denmark, even though we don't have a lot of renewable sources. So it's definitely also possible for Pakistan with all the renewable sources at hand. It requires a lot. It requires that you build your energy system with different alternative sources so you can compensate when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing. You need to have these different sources into play, and it's best if it happens within the national grid and not too much off-grid. Because if you have it within the same system, you are able to project and forecast and balance the different sources up against each other. Secondly, we have learned that energy efficiency can be done without losing any kind of competitiveness. Actually, if companies, manufacturers, producers, plants, whatever, go for energy efficiency, they will actually become more competitive. So that is what we have learned. We have also learned that carbon taxes, which is one of the themes for today, carbon taxes can actually be implemented in a very smart way so that the right technologies are nudged instead of, old-fashioned technologies or technologies based on fossil fuels. And then we have learned that firm and long-term policies from the government can foster innovation, can attract investments, and can give a country a competitive edge. We have also learned that all these things coming out of such a system can lead to a lot of exports of green technologies, and that's what we have seen in Denmark. Denmark is not a country with any natural resources, but we have learned that our green technologies are now, in demand all over the world. So it's very important that you have a framework of long-term commitment from the government to transform the economies in order to attract foreign investments. And then we have learned that going green is an individual responsibility. It's something that everyone in the society needs to be committed to. Going green is not something someone else is going to do. It requires an individual commitment. It's about understanding that actions starts with yourself. And for private persons, that means, for instance, don't throw your waste just on the street. Collect it, recycle it. Take public transportation or shared transportation whenever needed instead of taking your own car or taking your private motorbike. It's about planting a tree whenever you have a chance to plant a tree. And it's about when you do your shopping and when you how you place your orders and your demands, you show it by telling the politicians and telling the manufacturers that you want green products. So take action means that private persons need to take their own responsibilities. For companies, companies change your fuel, go green, insulate your buildings, energy optimize your production. It's super good business. Pakistan exports a lot of textiles and garments, clothes to Europeans, to Americans, and all these countries, they demand green value chains today. So the more greener the companies are, the more demand will there be for the products in the world. And government, please, long-term commitment to go green. Don't change the framework every time there's a new government or a new minister. Make sure you have a long-term planning, a long-term commitment. Otherwise, no one wants to invest in energy infrastructure. It takes maybe 20, 30, even 40 years to break even on big wind turbine farms or big hydro plants or whatever. And if you can see a track record of changing policies, changing tariffs, changing conditions for contracts, whatever, every time there's a new government or whatever, it's not good. It's not healthy. So you need very long-term planning on this. So it requires a lot from the individuals, from the companies, from the government, but it's possible. And it's not only possible, it's also needed. I have visited quite a few places in this wonderful, wonderful, beautiful country. And it's not that nice to see melting glaciers, changing ecosystems, floodings. So there's not only something that is doable to change the societies, it's definitely needed and required for millions of people. So thank you for being here, among other fighters against climate change. And once again, thank you, SDPI, for organizing it. It's super important and super well done. So thank you, and hope we will all join forces in combating climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for again setting a very good scene, setting the case of how sort of Denmark actually established these goals, and also some very good insightful recommendations coming out of, especially how we need to sort of ensure the policy consistencies at our end as well. And apologies for a bit of the noise at the back. We sincerely hope everyone's okay back there as well. So I believe with this, we'll be going more towards a technical discussion, especially very closely that links what carbon taxation initial concept is. So taking things initially from a bit of the basics. So if I can request the MIS team to please share the presentation. Let me invite Dr. Khalid Walid, if you can please, for the presentation, if you can join us here. Dr. Khalid will be taking us through the carbon taxation and market concept within Pakistan, linking it with some of the very upcoming discussions. After that, we'll be going towards more of a roundtable and discussion section with the experts as well. So, Dr. Khalid, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much, Excellency. Very, I would not say controversial, but very burning sort of topic in Pakistan right now, carbon taxation and market modalities. What I am going to do is a bit of context, a bit of overview, how these carbon taxation, they work and what is the landscape, and a few slides on what is the modeling of carbon market and what can be the price, potential price in terms of carbon taxation in Pakistan. Okay. Okay. Overview again, we have this multifaceted crisis. 3E, I always say economy, energy, environment. There were flood in 2022. We lost almost 30 billion USDs in 1 year for one flood. Share of unsustainable energy in Pakistan is increasing, particularly in power sector. We are investing heavily on coal sector. And then why carbon taxation is in the news? Because Pakistan is negotiating resilience and sustainability facility, RSF, with IMF, and it is 1 billion USD fund facility. Let me take you to the RSF that is negotiated in the case of Bangladesh. There was 11 reform measures, and second reform measure was government to adopt a periodic formula based on price adjustment mechanism for petroleum products, that is the petroleum levy or carbon taxation in Bangladesh. So if there is RSF in Pakistan, there would be some kind of carbon taxation in Pakistan. What is carbon taxation? I'm not going to bore you with these graphs, but still this is typical textbook economics, demand and supply curves, where these two intersects, you get your market price. Supply curve upward sloping shows the cost of commodity production, and demand shows the benefits. And where cost and benefits are equal, you get your prices. But there are certain commodities in the production process, you occur some sort of losses as well, or damages to the society. And those damages are not included in the traditional cost function or the supply function. So if you add these damages to the supply function, you will get your original or social cost curve, that will result in increased price. And this is the concept of carbon taxation or carbon tax, because you include those damages to the society in the cost. This is known as Pigovian taxes. Pigovian taxes, in 1920, a British economist, A.C. Pigot, presented that each emitter should pay the societal cost of the damage caused by their production in an appropriate price, that is carbon tax. So if it is imposed in Pakistan, now you know who to blame, not SDPI or Norwegian embassy. Okay, this is the global carbon pricing landscape. The regions or countries in purple and red, there is some sort of carbon tax imposed, and the blue area shows that either ETS, emission trading system, is imposed or being negotiated right now. So many countries currently experience having these carbon taxation. So in terms of GHG coverage, around 24% of total global emissions comes under carbon taxation or ETS, out of which 19% are from ETS, emission trading system, and 6% are from carbon taxation. Around 31% of emissions from high income countries comes under carbon taxation. In terms of revenues, these both ETS and carbon taxation, they generate billions of dollars of revenue for public revenue for the governments. Carbon tax generates around 29 billion USD worth of public revenue in 2024. If you bifurcate them by countries, France is at the top with 8.4 billion USDs generated through carbon taxation in 2023, followed by Canada, Sweden, and Canada has one aggregate national level carbon tax as well as regional carbon taxes, like British Columbia carbon tax. They generated 2 billion USDs from that tax as well. In terms of carbon pricing or carbon tax, it goes at maximum 176 USD per ton of CO2, which is in the case of Uruguay, and as low as 0.46 USD per ton of CO2. Coming back to Pakistan, there is a report by World Bank known as Country Climate Development Report, CCDR. According to CCDR, there can be two scenarios. One is low carbon tax plus revenue recycling, and second is high carbon tax plus revenue recycling. Low carbon tax is in the range of between $1 to $5 per ton of CO2 in 2025, whereas the high carbon tax plus revenue recycling is around 2 to 10 USDs per ton of CO2. If you sort of project these numbers, you will get that by 2050, a low carbon tax would reduce emissions by around 20% in Pakistan, where the high tax incidence will have stronger impacts and have emissions declined by as much as around 40% relative to business as usual scenario. Another thing that has been highlighted earlier as well, that tax on fossil fuels will make renewable energy more competitive. So there would be more demand of renewables, and there would be reduced emissions as well. Another thing that Dr. Solari also highlighted, that carbon tax would broaden the tax base because Pakistan has around 35 to 40% informal economy. So a carbon tax would levied would have low administrative costs but still generate revenue. So multi-pronged benefits can be achieved. And this is the projected GHG emissions. I have taken data of previous NDCs where 802 was the target in terms of unconditional GHG reductions. You can see that this dotted line shows a baseline business as usual scenario, and high carbon tax decrease the emissions by quite a lot. And this is the target that we need to achieve if you see the previous NDCs. So a high carbon tax can achieve that target as well. So these are some of the numbers. How much change would it result if we implement or impose some sort of a carbon tax? In terms of petrol, 1 liter of petrol, if there is $1 tax on 1 ton of CO2, the petrol price would increase by 0.63 rupees. And if it is 10 USD per ton of CO2, the petrol price would increase by 6.89 rupees. Same goes for diesel. Price would increase around 7.5 rupee in terms of 10 USD per ton of CO2 carbon tax. And in terms of coal, if there is 10 USD per ton of CO2 tax imposed, 1 kilowatt hour will be expensive around 5.56 PKRs. So the introduction of high carbon tax with full revenue recycling could theoretically generate around 28.6 billion USDs in 10 years for Pakistan. So this is a comparative analysis with different countries based on IMF's methodology. Pakistan would lie around here in terms of petroleum levy if it imposes a tax of 10 USD per ton of CO2 on petrol. You can see that it is not increased as much as other countries. So what are different modalities around carbon tax, and what we need to discuss as experts are sitting here? First is what should be the scope of this carbon tax or carbon levy? What sectoral coverage we should look at? Typically, it is levied on carbon dioxide content, particularly from fossil fuels. Second thing that we need to look for is what is the point of taxation? Upstream industries, particularly coal suppliers, because in Pakistan, coal suppliers, they are exempted in terms of income tax. So again, we need to think about that as well. Midstream, downstream, so that would be another point to ponder as well. Taxation and increasing rates, obviously, it should be equal to societal cost of carbon in terms of present value of future environmental damages as well. Distributional impact, what would be the impact on low-income households, and what would be impact on hard-to-abate sectors? That is again debatable, as rightly mentioned by Dr. Sajid as well. Competitiveness, Dr. Abid very rightly pointed out that if we impose carbon tax in Pakistan in terms of export competitiveness, particularly in the CBAM regime, Pakistan would be more competitive if Pakistan sort of impose a carbon tax domestically. And lastly, how to recycle the revenues, maybe invest in climate technologies, maybe adding these revenues to Pakistan Climate Fund, as it was mentioned in Climate Change Act 2017. And lastly, tax swap, reducing labor capital taxes for economic efficiency as well. That can be done as well. So one last slide on carbon border adjustment mechanism. Dr. Abid very briefly and in explained manner explained it. But if you see this fourth graph, you'll see that Pakistan's electricity sector is 1.4 times more carbon intensive as compared to EU. If it is 1.4 times more carbon intensive, manufacturing industries, those who are using national grid's electricity, their carbon content will be higher as compared to EU. And if they are exporting that content, manufacturing to EU, they would face CBAM fee. So maybe a domestic tax in Pakistan, that will make sense. India is developing one. Vietnam and Thailand, they're working on carbon taxation. So we need, if we want to be competitive, we need to think on those grounds as well. If we sort of compare the pros and cons of carbon tax or carbon levy, maybe carbon market instruments that can generate some sort of revenue stream for low carbon industries as well. So based on this, looking forward to discussion, what we are going to discuss here today is what are different carrot and stick approaches of climate smart fiscal planning, carbon taxation and subsidies through a market-based mechanism, the relationship and analyze how a carbon tax system can complement Pakistan's efforts to develop a carbon market, attract climate finance, and particularly in terms of CBAM regime. What would be the policy design? What would be the sectoral impacts, pricing structure, revenue utilization, and lastly, the prospect of carbon taxation in upcoming federal budget 2026. For this, I thank you so much.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Khalid, for highlighting, again, giving a very good introduction about what the carbon tax is, linking it very strongly to the case of Pakistan as well. And as we go towards the roundtable and panel discussion, we'll sort of see. Dr. Khalid has actually pointed out, and I'll sort of request IMA's team to keep the slide on for some time to just to sort of understand what questions are we sort of trying to have the discussion here. So as we go towards the roundtable, we have been joined by a very distinguished set of experts. I'll be introducing them as we go to each of the ones. So from the, again, economic perspective that Dr. Khalid has sort of said here, let's first sort of start with Ms. Afia Malik, a senior economist at Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, PIDE. So thank you so much, Ms. Afia, for joining us. So yeah, I think, from these questions, let me sort of make something up that, one thing that I believe many of the stakeholders do have in mind is that sort of why, Pakistan, what's exactly the reasons we're already, again, a low developing, low carbon footprint economy. The economy is already has a very limited fiscal space as well. So given Pakistan's current economic challenges, including inflation, industrial shutdown that we have been observing, and a very narrow tax base, do you, as of the moment, see carbon tax as a viable fiscal policy tool at this stage? And if you also sort of talk about what economic risks and some of the trade-offs should be carefully assessed before considering its implementation. So I'm sort of trying to be the an advocate of the industries here, because here we have a lot of oil and gas industry sitting with us. We have the ministry sitting with us. We have a lot of industrial experts sitting with us as well. And Dr. Afia, the second part of the question is that if you can sort of, that instead of introducing again a carbon tax, are there any other fiscal measures such as any targeted subsidies or incentives or any sector-specific levies that can also achieve similar environmental as well as the economic goals as well? So once again, thank you so much for joining us. It's over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll start. No doubt, Pakistan carbon emissions are slightly increasing because of our increased dependence on fossil fuels for road transport, as well as because of the energy-intensive industries, as well as in other sectors as well, and also because of the coal-fired power plants. And I also agree with the argument that it can be an effective tool to generate more revenues. But at what costs? There are costs associated with the implementation of this carbon tax. In Pakistan, we already have a very high tax element on the energy sector, specifically the electricity sector as well as the fuel sector. Almost 70 rupees per liter is the petroleum levy already installed on petrol and diesel. So, and the direct impact of any increase in these prices is going to be on the poor, because who spend a major portion of their income on energy and as well as on the fuel. And now what directly when there is an increase, when there is an implementation of carbon tax, it is going to, the first thing it will will be, it will increase the cost of production. And when there is an increase in cost of production, it will increase inflation, it will increase the cost of goods and services, and it will directly impact the consumers. Now, coming to the industries, our economy is struggling and in general, but the industry is struggling in particular because of the although there are many other factors, but energy cost is the significant factor which has affected the competitiveness of our industries. When there is any increase, when there is an implementation of this carbon tax, it will increase the cost of production, and the domestic industry, which is not export oriented, it will transfer, if it survives. First of all, if it survives, then it will transfer this cost to the consumer. It will increase the cost of goods and services, and it will be transferred to the consumer. As far as the other part, the export-oriented industries is concerned, already because of the increased electricity prices and energy cost, they are losing their competitiveness. They are struggling for their competitiveness to remain competitive. But with the addition of this, and let me add one more thing, deindustrialization is on the rise. Industries are moving towards closure. And if they survive, it will have a negative effect on their competitiveness. It will erode their competitiveness. Okay. Finally, for the success of carbon levy, alternatives should be available. If there are alternates are available, then there are more chances of its success. Otherwise, it will lead only for the, it will result in the dissatisfaction of the general public, as well as politically it will be unacceptable. And finally, for any for this tax to be, if it is urgent or it is essential to be implemented, then it should be selectively applied. Instead of applying across the board, it should be selectively applied to only those sectors or industries which are more carbon intensive, or which are emitting more carbon emissions, or which are more energy intensive. And now coming to the second part of your questions, what alternatives do we have? Yes, we do have industries. You also mentioned earlier in the presentation also about the CBAM. Industries are already investing in renewable energy. Many of the export-oriented industries, which are not only singly not dependent on grid, they are also installing now their captive solar power plants. So they are investing in renewable energy to counter the impact of CBAM limitation conditionalities in future. Although majority of our export-oriented industry is textile, which is energy intensive, and they are not on the list of those which are going to be affected, but still they have started investing in the renewable energy. So instead of carbon levy, the better option would be tax rebates or tax credit to provide incentive to industries, or as well as to the other sectors to invest, or to invest in the renewable energy, or to move towards the more efficient technologies to reduce the impact of carbon, to mitigate the impact of this climate impact. And secondly, there are other alternatives as well. One more thing. Here, to talk about the fuel is, I also mentioned that we are dependent on fossil fuels for our road transport, but we don't have enough infrastructure for EVs. So, and one more, instead of going for taxation, why can't we move towards our urban planning? Urban planning, why don't we focus on developing our cities as more compact and smart, and move towards smart cities to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and to reduce our carbon footprint, instead of moving towards implementing more and more taxes? Because again, in Pakistan, tax rates are already very high. And it is this specifically, this tax is going to be regressive. So instead of providing, implementing tax, it would be better to incentivize sectors and industries through tax credits. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Mafia. The points are extremely well noted. So, yeah, before we sort of get to a bit of a response to that, let's sort of take the perspective of the private sector as well. We're very pleased to have with us two from the private sector. One is from RE Energies as well as Bafi Energy. So, firstly, coming to Atif Tanveer Saab. Atif Saab is currently working as the manager strategy at JV at Mari Energy. So, Atif Saab, again, a part of the question is pretty much same as what we also proposed to Ms. Afia as well, but that how is the industry sort of taking the whole discussion that is actually happening? And again, the idea about here is to also sort of give some of the recommendations that you feel are, again, very important going forward as well. So, I mean, given that Ms. Afi also talked about Pakistan's reliance on the domestic energy production for economic stability, how do you see carbon levy as a key policy instrument at this stage? Also, from an industrial perspective, if you would like to highlight any of the key points going forward as well. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ved. I actually agree what Ms. Asiya said, just because from the oil and gas perspective, we know that our energy sector is energy mix is primarily dependent on the fossil fuel, and that fossil fuel is largely imported. Our current crude oil production at country level is around 70 to 75,000 barrels a day, whereas we require around 500,000 barrels a day to keep the transport section moving. So, and that imported energy is not only a burden on the forest exchange reserve that we have, but also very expensive to sustain. So the E&P companies have a tremendous pressure from the government to increase the share of the local oil and gas production. So in this context, if we look at this carbon tax, what's going to happen? And normally, when the carbon tax is imposed, it flows through the economy and ultimately it goes down to the end consumers. The actual burden will be borne by the end consumers. But in sectors like oil and gas, which is highly regulated, where we cannot, our product prices are fixed. So what it is going to do is it is actually forcing E&P companies to slow down their activities, which they actually at the moment the government desire is to increase the exploration and production activities in the country so that we can increase the oil and gas, local oil and gas production and bring down the weighted average cost of the oil and gas. But if we are burdened with additional taxes, uh, uh, then obviously what we are going to do is that we are going to slow down our E&P activities because they'll be paying out of our profits. I'm not saying that the carbon tax is not an effective tool. It is, and we see that globally it has been implemented very successfully. But the way it is being implemented, we just discussed about the CBAM. If you see, I mean, it has been implemented in phases. I mean, there were transitional phase where the government, in fact, supported the industry to adopt to the changes that they need to do. If so, but here, if we are discussing in March that we are going to, in the next budget, we are going to implement the levy, that we don't have any time to adopt to. And one more thing that His Excellency Mr. Ambassador mentioned, that it is everybody's responsibility. It's individual responsibility. Even if we are serious about the carbon emission, then even the responsible use of energy will make a lot of difference. Yeah, and at the government, and I must say that my company, we are actually planning to develop the CCS project without any fiscal incentive. It is going to be one of the first project in Pakistan where we are actually capturing CO2 from one of our processing facility and sequestering into saline aquifer. So we are only relying on the carbon credits to offset some of our investment. It's a very expensive project, it runs hundreds of millions of dollars. The challenge we are facing at the moment is that, in fact, no policy or the regulation exists at the moment, which actually gives us the right on the pore space we are going to sequester the CO2. So that is what is needed on the part of the government to support us. We are willing to invest, but this is what we are expecting from the government to do. So instead of, rather than exposing us to a tax, direct levying a tax, I would suggest that everybody has it should be a thoughtful process. It should be implemented in stages. And CBAM is the best example, as I
Sure. Thank you so much, Sab. So, yeah, but I believe one point that we will sort of try to come back is that the points are very well noted. There is, but again, at the same time, a very strong connection between the carbon taxation and the markets, which we'll certainly be coming to. But before coming to Ms. Sobia from PG Sab, let me come to the second private sector that we have. We're very pleased to have with us Saad Saab. He's a country lead business development and new ventures at WAFI, formerly known as the Shell. Again, Saad, pretty much the same question. How is the industry actually seeing that? If there's any addition that you would like to sort of meet to the points that have been made, or any other perspective that you would highlight before we go towards the second quantum debate of the discussion as well. Same.
Thank you, Ved. Firstly, Assalamu alaikum and good evening to all the participants, and a thank you to SDPI and the Embassy of Denmark for holding this conversation. Very relevant points raised by Ms. Afia as well as Atif Saab. What I'll try and just share is a bit of a perspective on behalf of the energy sector. So if we look at the energy sector in Pakistan, it roughly contributes to around 45% of all of emissions. That includes your electricity generation, other exploratory activities, as well as transportation. So transportation contributes to almost half of all carbon emissions in Pakistan. The idea or the concept of putting in a carbon tax, while it may sound great, and in a lot of countries around the world, it has generated a lot of positive impact. But we need to understand the kind of challenges and complexities that the Pakistan energy sector has. So starting off with circular debt, be it the exploratory sector or the OMC sector or the power sector on its own, that still continues to plague. And every month when we get our electricity bill, we can literally feel the pinch of either the sorry to say, the circular debt or the capacity payment. Then close to a billion, almost a trillion rupees is lost every year to structural inefficiencies. So your line losses, your theft, and other sort of inefficiencies, they continue to be there. If I talk about specifically my sector, which is the oil and gas sector, or the downstream, which relates to oil marketing companies, there are so many challenges and complexities. So majority of your carbon molecule or of your fuel molecules are imported. The kind of challenges we face on the port, the kind of damages that we have to pay, the sector continues to be a highly regulated and highly taxed sector. Almost 25% of the end consumer price goes as levies. So right now it has been raised to 70 rupees. A couple of years ago, it was around 40 rupees. And this year alone, the target is to raise over 10% of your total federal tax revenues just through petroleum development levy. So your total tax revenue this year expected to be around 12.2 trillion rupees, and petroleum development levy is expected to raise close to 1.3 trillion rupees, which is almost 10%. Based on this, right now, I feel the Pakistani market is not ready, unfortunately, to see the positive impact on carbon taxation. As Ms. Afia rightly pointed out, that majority of your carbon emissions are via transportation. There is so much merit and benefit in terms of introducing sustainable public transport, taking vehicles off the road. I think that is the way forward. Secondly, carbon tax is something that even the most advanced countries are still debating on how to use effectively. In Pakistan, still, we are using Euro 1 or Euro 2 engines. So there is definite merit in improving your anti-pollution regulations or existing emission regulations. If you go on the streets in Karachi or Lahore, not so much in Islamabad, you will find big vehicles that are still from the 1970s and 60s, and the kind of carbon that they are emitting in the air. So there is definite merit in taking them off the road. And, taking our engine standards from Euro 1 to Euro 3 and Euro 4. So right now the world is using fuel or engine standards where there are only 5 or at max 50 parts per million of sulfur. We are still at 500 parts per million. So that is a definite challenge as well. Also, before you levy any more tax on the sector, which as Adif Saab also said, is then going to go to the end consumer. And as you showed, that the percentage or the kind of estimated pricing is going to be 7 rupees, which means around 10% additional tax. It is going to go to the end consumer. It is going to increase your inflation, and it is going to further dent the volumes that we are seeing. So right now we are already witnessing 12 to 13% decline in the end consumer offtake of petroleum products. You should work on, what the government should work on is creating more efficiencies in the system that would automatically increase the demand for petroleum products. And if we are just able to get the demand to what it was 2 years ago, at the current PDL level, we would be able to generate close to $1 billion. Incremental, which is more than the kind of fund facility that we are negotiating with the IMF. Also, I think in terms of the transition to EVs, still there is much work to do in terms of not only introducing more incentives for the consumers to buy EV, but also focusing on the smaller EV vehicles or the larger EV vehicles. So right now, it is so unfortunate that right now majority of the EVs are for people who consider them as a luxury, not a necessity. So either you need to focus on your two-wheelers and your public transportation to get shifted to EV, or you need to focus on introducing cheaper EV vehicles so that your mass marketed products can improve. So with that, I'm going to
thank you.
hold it back.
No,
thank you so much.
Very well noted points, Asaf. Thank you for highlighting that perspective. One thing I do believe is, again, this link with which I'll also be coming to Ms. Sobia is how to sort of structure it. So thank you so much. Ms. Sobia is currently the advisor at Park German Climate Energy Partnership, PGSAP, and again, a very close partner of SDPI. So we also, some of the points have been highlighted by the industry as well as Ms. Afi as well. So given Pakistan's industrial structure and the recent developments in its carbon market policy we just had at the start of the year, how can, if it should be a carbon tax or the levy be designed to ensure that industries does remain competitive while also driving the decarbonization? So if there are any lessons Pakistan can learn from international experiences such as ETS? And also we have a second question from you as well, that with mechanisms like the CBAM we have been talking about coming into play, how should Pakistan structure its carbon taxation to align with the export compliances as well? So with this, coming over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, a very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for having me and also for organizing this very important debate today. I listened with great interest to Tanveer and Saad and also Afia's input, and one becomes just aware of also the political economy side of any sort of carbon market mechanism that is to be introduced in this country and how this should be addressed. But what remains to be said is that issues of what I've heard so far, issues of transparency, the issue of externality and who's going to cover the cost of these externalities, and then transferring of costs to, say, the economically weak or vulnerable populations. I think these are also deeply intertwined with issues of climate governance, as well as, in a sense, also climate justice. And I think these are perhaps reserved for a discussion at a later time, and perhaps more appropriate for a discussion with even the green justices. But this was not the question that you asked me. The question relates to, we find ourselves at an economic as well as an environmental crossroads. So the question isn't whether Pakistan can afford a carbon tax. Rather, the question is, can Pakistan afford to not have one? And so Pakistan's industrial decarbonization strategy has to integrate the proposal that's currently being discussed regarding the carbon levy in the 25-26 budget. But not only that, it also has to link up with green taxonomy frameworks. And there are essentially two dimensions to my answer right now. The one aspect is the obvious one that we're discussing right now, and that is, how do we create a carbon tax structure which is implementable, is feasible? And then the second one is the very obvious, what has already been stated, which is the issue of mitigating the economic impact of any tax and supporting decarbonization efforts through a very robust revenue recycling. Thank you to Khalid for his beautiful presentation and for setting this stage so well. And in his presentation, Khalid had a low road model, and he had, a low road scenario and then a high road scenario. So what I would like to propose is perhaps a middle of the road scenario, which is more of a hybrid carbon pricing model with a phased approach. So if you have a three-phased approach, phase one would essentially, and phase one goes up to 2 years. This would begin with a carbon levy of, say, up to 1,500 rupees per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is applied only to high-emitting industries, and these would be cement, steel, and textiles. And so the benchmark could be, if you have emissions annually of over 25,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, then this levy would be applied. And with this, you would cover approximately up to 250 large industrial facilities while protecting your SME base. In the expansion phase, which is through years 3 and 5, you could gradually reduce this threshold to 15,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which means essentially that you're casting a slightly bigger net, and increase the price to up to 2,500 rupees per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And this is with differentiated rates for trade exposed sectors. And then finally, in the maturity phase, which is plus 5 years, you would have a hybrid system with both carbon tax and limited emissions trading for overachievers. Potentially, what you're doing is that you're linking up with other carbon markets, regional carbon markets as well. So in a nutshell, you're starting with a very low tax rate, and then you're escalating it annually till you get to about 75 tons, between $50 to $75 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent annually up till 2030. There's a lot of learning from the Global South itself, and there have been very successful examples. So, for example, revenue recycling, like what you have in South Africa. This has demonstrated very, very well how this sort of a graduated implementation can protect vulnerable industries, where 25% of tax proceeds have been plowed back to fund renewable energy adoption in heavy industry. And then finally, a very welcome development at our end in Pakistan is the development of the green taxonomy. And this needs to be aligned very, very carefully. I'm cognizant of the fact that we are at a public consultation phase of the taxonomy. So it's very important that this feedback finds its way there. So using this taxonomy to define eligibility for tax rebates, ensuring that investments in sectors, especially like solar powered manufacturing, qualify for offsets. But more than that, I would also like to link these discussions. And, I'm a massive fan of systems thinking. So we need to look at the picture in its totality and not just different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that we focus on. It's also important to look at the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Facility, and then also to match this with the development priorities that have been outlined in the 13th Five-Year Development Plan, the Iran-Pakistan Plan. And so we could very successfully allocate up to 50% of carbon levy revenue to Iran-Pakistan to support R&D for low carbon industrial technologies. And I think there's a lot of learning there from Denmark. As you mentioned, green technology is now your biggest resource. So that's there. Germany obviously is also poised to deliver. And then link the remaining revenue to Green Pakistan initiatives. So to afforestation projects, which already have a 125 billion rupee budget, creating greater synergy between industrial decarbonization and nature-based solutions. And then obviously emissions trading systems and their integration. So international best practice also is how you can pilot an ETS for either the power sector or cement as an example, using IMF's RSF technical assistance, and incorporate free allowances for export industries, for example, textiles, to mirror the EU ETS's early phase competitiveness safeguards that we have. So we have a number of examples very successful examples where Chile has done this very successfully with tax electricity plants to avoid overwhelming SMEs. In Colombia, they have a carbon tax which is combined with a carbon neutral certification program, which has allowed businesses to offset their tax liability through investment. And then in India, they have a very successful perform, achieve, and trade scheme, which establishes very sector-specific energy-efficient targets for the different industries. And this, again, is something which is very easy to adapt to Udan Pakistan itself. I've been speaking at length. Do you really want me to go to the second question, or shall we pause?
We can circle back to that one.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ms. Subi. I believe there are a lot of answers for some of the the points that previously the private sector has mentioned. We're really thankful to you, Ms. Sobia, for that. So let me come to Sohail Malik Saab before coming to Dr. Alexandra. Both of them are the experts in also sort of suggesting the response to the perspective that has been highlighted by the private sector. So firstly, thank you so much, Sohail Saab. He's currently the technical team lead at Climate Resourcing Coordination Center, CRCC. So Sohail Saab, again, one of the perspective that we have seen, again, which is coming up is that we really need to sort of see where do we strike that balance between the environmental goal and some of the economic realities that we have sort of discussed here. And I believe, so in that context, I mean, how do you think Pakistan ensure that a carbon, any of the similar levies does not sort of disproportionately burden the low income groups or small businesses while still incentivize major these industries to decarbonize or themselves? So if you can sort of to respond to that, and after that, we'll for some of the very quick international success stories and what can actually work, I'll come to Dr. Alexandra next. Yeah, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Coming at the end, and I mean, there have been so much said. I mean, I don't want to really reiterate what has been said, but I will be forced to kind of come back to some of the issues. Firstly, I think a special thanks to the ambassador and for supporting STPI in this initiative. And who else can be better? Denmark with the 50 years, as you said, having both systems, carbon taxation and carbon markets, been in vogue. And also Denmark having about 40% of their emissions priced. I mean, this is something great. I mean, you have made strides and you have set examples, and I think we have good examples to follow. And I will just quote a few which Sobia has also quoted, and I may be just repeating them. But I think the most important thing which has been said is that carbon taxation, no doubt, is the most powerful tool for decarbonization. This has been proven, and it is also for attracting climate finance. This is clear. And this is also exemplified by 74 countries and regions practicing carbon taxation and markets around the world and covering almost 24% of emissions. So that is something which is itself tells a lot about it. Coming to us, Pakistan, we have a set of issues both on the socio-economic front and both on the climate front. So, I mean, if we look at our GDP, it is around $1,600 to $1,700, which is about 35% of the average GDP, global average GDP. So we have a big uphill task to go forward with. And we are also, our poverty rate is also very high. I don't want to quote figures because different figures are there, but we have a high poverty rate. What does it say? It says that we have no other option than to strike a balance between our environmental objectives and our socioeconomic imperatives. That sets the stage. I mean, that's where the whole things are. So, I mean, but we have to also see which are our key emitting sectors. 4 key emitting sectors. Top being energy, including transportation. Second being agriculture, including water. Third being industry, and fourth, at a lower percentage, but still significant, is the waste. So we have to be cognizant about our key emitters, because when we move to carbon taxation, we need to be mindful of our key emitters, because that's where the whole paradigm is. So where are the challenges? Challenges are that carbon taxation, no doubt, has a regressive economic impact. Why I say that? Because if you apply a flat carbon tax, which is being talked about, then that flat carbon tax will have disproportionate effect on low-income households and also on SMEs. Those low-income households which have 60% of their income going to essentials like energy and food, what else do you want from them? I mean, you want to kind of put them under more misery. So that is something which if you do it in a flat carbon tax model, then it won't work. So the challenge is in how to address the regressive economic impact on both individual households and also on the SMEs. Then coming to SMEs, I mean, this is a sector which is a very wide sector, which currently we are trying to address. It is something which is not being addressed. It falls between the microfinance and the small, medium, and it's a big band. And it is quite intensive, energy intensive sector. So it uses electricity, it uses gas. So whatever impact the carbon tax would have in form of levies would come to them. For example, if there is a 10% increase due to the carbon levy, their production cost will go up to from 5 to 8%. So that means they become more or less competitive. They won't be able to compete in the market. So that is another thing, another challenge we have to look into. Then the competitiveness, if I'm using the word competitiveness, industrial competitiveness, Dr. Abid has talked about it. I'm not going to repeat it. CBAM is a reality. If we don't go for carbon taxation, I think that will be losing on our export sector, which is, I mean, if textile, if we take 60% of the export is in textile, so we'll be losing heavily on that if we don't have carbon tax. So we are stuck between. I mean, we have to do it. We like it or not. This is something which is good for the for ourselves also. But as I mentioned, that it has to be. So if we talk about all these, how do we do it? What are the ways of doing it? So we have to talk, we have to go back to our Paris Agreement key statement, this differentiated but common responsibility. So this is differentiated carbon tax. That's what we are talking about. If we have to design a good carbon tax regime, carbon taxation regime, it has to be a differentiated carbon tax regime, according to which, I mean, as Sylvia said, South Africa, amongst other things, they say that the emitters pay more, the high emitters pay more, and you exempt the low businesses. You exempt the HHEs, small household. You exempt the SMEs. So you have to design it in a manner that it really suits your own, own socioeconomic profile. Then, there was a mention about revenue recycling. We mentioned about revenue recycling. Canada's 90% of carbon tax revenue goes to the cash transfer to households. They give it as rebates. 90% of carbon tax, because they know it hurts. Those guys who pay, it hurts to them, so they do it. So what I'm trying to say is that cash recycling is a must for us. So we are not talking about flat carbon tax. I mean, then Japan and Germany have, for SMEs, they have this energy efficiency fund. So they put the money, the revenue into this carbon taxation revenue to the fund so that they can access energy efficient equipment. Then we have a gradual and phased implementation approach. As Sylvia had said, Colombia, amongst other things, has proven that they started very low. They started with $5 per ton carbon tax, and they over 5 years period, they increased it. Not only they did that, but every year they did an impact assessment, the economic impact assessment, to see if it is hurting the economic growth or not. I mean, that's very important. You don't only apply carbon tax, but you also look at its economic cost, which needs to be measured at the same time. So, I mean, then if we are going to go for carbon tax, we have to link it to the international trade. I mean, CBAM standards and all that, so that we are not just levying it just like that. We have a strategy, we have an approach which really links with the international trade. So that's what it is. So, I mean, from my side, that to ensure that fairness, what you had mentioned, fairness and equity and all that, we target major polluters, as Sophie had mentioned. You can target them. We use revenues for cash transfer and for adaptation, where we are looking for grants, we use there, and we implement gradually with also measuring the impact.
Yes, thank you, Sohail Sab. Yeah, thank you so much. Wonderful. You have rightly responded to the question. So before going to our panel chair, Ali Kamal Sab, let's take one initial interventions from Dr. Alexandra. Dr. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us. I believe she has one slide to just show while she sort of responds to the question. So Dr. Alexandra, she's currently the Director at Climate Action Center of Excellence, one of the leading institutions in discussing the carbon taxation, carbon markets as well. So Dr. Alexandra, I mean, you have seen how the private sector, the stakeholders in Pakistan are sort of what their perspectives are, also as well as from the climate experts here as well. So perhaps in your perspective, looking at a bit of the international angle, what key design elements make these policies effective and what challenges could they face as well? So can you also, if you can share any of the notable examples and lessons learned where this has been very successfully implemented, and if that can somehow be linked to the case of Pakistan as well. So yeah, thank you. With this, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Good afternoon, distinguished participants. Ramadan Kareem. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a privilege to join you today for this critical dialogue. Now, thank you for the question, which I will dive deeper into shortly, but I have prepared 3 slides to go through a few additional global insights on carbon pricing. The first slide is a very powerful slide. We have already seen it, but it shows really a snapshot of the 75 carbon pricing systems currently in operation worldwide, including both carbon taxes and emission trading schemes. Middle-income countries are rapidly adopting these tools. And in 2023, sector-specific pricing mechanisms emerged for aviation and maritime emissions. And of course, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, was implemented. Revenue from carbon pricing schemes exceeded $100 billion for the first time in 2023, which shows its potential as a fiscal instrument. Countries are also expanding their pricing systems beyond traditional sectors. For instance, Germany, South Korea, and Singapore now include waste incineration. The EU and UK are phasing in carbon pricing for maritime transport, covering CO2 emissions from large ships starting in 2026. And many jurisdictions now combine multiple carbon pricing instruments using ETS schemes and carbon taxes to increase coverage and flexibility. Next slide. Carbon pricing remains most common in the power and industry sector, and we heard already a lot about this today. More than half of all ETS and carbon taxes cover these sectors, and other sectors such as road transport, buildings, agriculture, they tend to be covered more by carbon taxes. But while carbon pricing is designed to reduce emissions, how the revenue is used is equally important. And again, a lot was already said about that today. Globally, carbon revenues are allocated in 3 primary ways. More than half of global revenues are funding green and development projects. The EU directs 20% of ETS revenues toward clean transport, 17% toward energy efficiency, and 12% toward renewable energy. About 25% are contributing to general government budgets. This is the case in France and in the UK, where carbon tax revenues support broader economic priorities. And 10% of the revenues are distributed to households and businesses to reduce financial impact. For example, we heard already Canada's carbon pricing system returns rebates to households, ensuring that 8 in 10 Canadians receive more back than they pay. Next slide, the last one. And another critical component of carbon pricing policies is the use of carbon credits. Currently, 40% of all carbon pricing instruments allow credit use, but most of them with restrictions. Most jurisdictions limit offsets to domestically generated credits. This is the case, for example, in South Africa. We heard already about South Africa as a notable example, Chile and Colombia. Singapore now allows international carbon credits for up to 5% of taxable emissions, provided they meet strict environmental integrity standards. And reason for the use of carbon credits as additional instrument to carbon tax are mainly cost savings for businesses, lowering compliance expenses, then an expanded price signal beyond taxed or regulated sectors, and incentive for investment into high impact mitigation projects. So now I want to briefly talk about two examples, two notable examples, namely more deeper into South Africa and then Singapore. Both have very distinct approach. South Africa, introduced its carbon tax in 2019, with the first phase running until 2025 and the second phase beginning in 2026. The tax applies to fossil fuel combustion, fugitive emissions from mining and industrial processes, such as cement and steel production. Key design elements are a broad coverage, so the tax applies across multiple sectors, covering 6 greenhouse gases. Then a gradual implementation. The initial rate of South African rand 120 per ton CO2 equivalent, this is around now $6.5 US, was phased in gradually with small annual increases. For example, in 2023, it was at rand 159 per ton CO2 equivalent. Then use of carbon offsets. Companies can offset 5 to 10% of their emissions using eligible domestic carbon credits to reduce compliance costs. And revenue neutrality and recycling. So collected revenues are used to support green initiatives, compensate vulnerable households, and provide tax incentives for emission reductions. But the key challenges expressed industrial resistance, because businesses, especially in energy-intensive industries, push back due to competitiveness concerns, and limited impact on emissions because the initial low tax rate provided a weaker price signal, requiring now stronger increases for greater effectiveness. And Singapore introduced its carbon tax also in 2019, covering 70% of emissions across power, manufacturing, waste, and water sectors. It is one of the most comprehensive coverage globally. And key design elements here include a predictable tax trajectory. The tax started at Singapore $5 per ton CO2 equivalent, so from 2019 to 2023, and is scheduled to rise to Singapore $45 per ton CO2 equivalent by 2026 to 2027, and reaching then Singapore $50 to 80 by 2030. Then the use of international carbon credits is relatively unique. Since 2024, businesses can offset 5% of taxable emissions with Article 6 credits. And support for emission-intensive trade exposed industries is provided through a transition framework, which provides temporary allowances for businesses at risk of carbon leakage, meaning that these sectors would potentially relocate to jurisdictions with weaker carbon policies. Yep. And revenue use for decarbonization initiatives is emphasized green economy investments and also household rebates to mitigate cost of living impacts. And key challenges.
Dr. Alexandra, if you can just sort of summarize in 1 minute.
Sorry, just talk about the key challenges again here. Again, the same concern competitiveness. Because of high carbon prices that could put local industries at disadvantage, and electricity cost pass-through, which means that power companies pass on some tax costs to consumers, requiring rebates to shield vulnerable households. Maybe just 4 points for Pakistan to potentially consider: to start with a low rate and increase gradually to give industries time to adjust, allow limited carbon credit use to ease compliance, and recycle revenues into green initiatives and household support to ensure fairness and public acceptance, and provide targeted relief to trade exposed industries to prevent economic disruptions. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra. Very useful recommendation. So with this, I will be coming towards the panel chair, Mr. Ali Kamal, who's the Chief SDGs section at the Ministry of Planning, Development and Special Initiatives. Sir, once again, thank you so much for listening to the very interesting discussions and the response from the key stakeholders present, the private sector, the development partners over here. So, I mean, looking at from the SDGs angle, we have again, if you'd like to sort of respond to the sort of suggestions coming out of the stakeholders, and perhaps also sort of try to link. How do you see this whole debate around the carbon taxation linking with Pakistan's broader development priorities under the SDGs? And also, from perhaps a policy making perspective, do you think Pakistan's current fiscal and the policy planning framework is ready to absorb and implement this carbon tax we have been talking about? So if any recommendation needs to go or any points that needs to go towards that and well. And thank you so much once again for joining us with this. Over to you.
Thank you, Ved. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, SDPI. Thank you, Sulari Saab. Thank you, Denmark Embassy, I think, Ambassador, for inviting me over here. I didn't know you said something about me and I didn't agree with it. But anyways, as far as carbon tax is concerned, it is very well in there. And my colleague here told you about the Uran Pakistan, which is the flagship document, the flagship initiative of Planning Commission right now. We are going from door to door to all the provinces, all the private sector, civil society organizations to implement it very effectively. Though we have 5 years, I'll be glad that we will be completing that first phase of KPIs. That what should we do in the next 2 months? We should not take more than 2 months, and then we start implementing through National Economic Transformation Unit. As far as carbon tax is concerned, my very good friend here, Sajid Amin Saab, we always talk about this thing in a little different way. That why do we need a carbon tax in a different way, not exactly on the carbon tax, whether we are using it to emit, to stop the emission, or we need to increase the tax revenues. Because last year we were talking about sin tax, which is a tax on cigarettes, whether it's a sin tax or we need to increase the tax revenues. So this is one of those things which are very important to note. I will be very candid, though I'm a comment officer, but still. So it's for the economists and other development experts, it's a Pigovian tax law, and we tax on the usage of carbon-based fuels, which reduce emissions, and that's for the sustainability as far as the SDGs are concerned. It will definitely increase the cost of production, as Mafia already mentioned. It will reduce the production as well as, but when we say the increase the cost of production, then there is a specific market which wants carbon neutral products. So that market, if there people are going to pay double, triple the price, like the whole food market in US, there's an organic market, so they can pay triple the price of tomatoes or potatoes or anything which is produced organically. So it is very interesting to see whether if even if there is a cost of production which is increasing, whether the market is absorbing that price or not. If it is absorbing, if there's a capacity to pay, then there will be a mild inflation increase, but not much. That's as a macroeconomist I can portray. So there's a product that is produced by reducing carbon emission. So that is an automatic marketing as well. That these are the factories or these are the corporate sector which are producing carbon neutral products. So that's an automatic marketing as well. So they don't need to spend on the on the marketing side as well. The exports grow more. They will have higher profits. They will have higher wages. Then everything is not about winning or losing. So everything is not about winning. So there are some losers, as we always learn in Econ 101. So then people who lose, or the labor or the employees who lose, they will be compensated. That's what my fellow said. Cash recycling is a good term. It's a social protection in other way. They will get on the safety nets. Another thing which that's one aspect of the redistribution of the job losses. Another impact of the clean technology adaptation and research and development on it, so that their cost of production. So there is a decreasing cost market industries concept. So the overall cost of the market or the cost of production will decrease eventually, and we will have a level playing field for the carbon neutral and non-carbon neutral products. That's on the long term perspective. We can say 2035 maybe, when we are expecting that we will have $1 trillion economy. Another thing which is absorbing fiscal carbon tax policy, and we have several institutions and several regulatory gaps which we need to fill in. We are giving fossil fuel subsidies, we have capacity payments, and we have circular debt. Then even if we have carbon tax on it, there are certain compliance issues as far as the private sector is concerned. I know private sector don't like this statement, but there are certain compliances, and for that compliance issue, we again need to monitor whether they are implementing it or not. Again, there's a conflict between the private sector and the government sector, whether they want to produce more, whether they want to pay more, whatever they are producing as far as the carbon tax is concerned. Again, I'm afraid that we will end up with carbon tax authority, carbon tax department in a in the taxation one. There will be no law whether, if we go into the micro setting, that whether we should implement or we can implement carbon tax in the market or not. But that's the legal ways which we can do it in a day or in few weeks. But there's another point which we have on the subsidies side. But if we do not have money to subsidize, then the other way is to tax it, either to take the loan or tax it. So these are two different ways to increase the carbon emissions, to control carbon emissions. Last, which is important, I don't know whether there's any politician over here or not. There is a political resistance as well. There is a social resistance as well. There is a private resistance as well. And overall, there is economic resistance. So in the whole sum, it's not very easy. I was looking at your statement, the first statement. It is not very easy, the market-based carbon tax system, which affects the overall scenario. And I was asking Ms. Afia that what is CABM? So it will be a kaboom type thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malik Kamal Saab, for giving that's a really good conclusion of the discussion that we'll be having. How do we actually move forward? So thank you for that. So with this, we will be moving towards the discussion section. We do have a lot of private sector, and if anyone has any questions, please do let us know. We'll be having a 10-minute to 12-minute Q&A following up with the discussion going forward. Yeah, so the floor is open for any suggestions, inputs, comments, or questions that you have over here, please. You can sort of raise your hands, or if anyone is sitting at the back, we'll request them, our colleagues to, if someone from SJPI can forward a mic to the colleagues. Yeah, so. Sarim, if you can sort of, join us, please. Yeah, okay. Sarim, if you can give a mic to there, please. And please do mention the speaker you would like to sort of request to respond to this question as well, or I'll sort of divert the question to them as well.
Saif Rahman from Geo News. My question is, any expert from the oil sector There are approximately 7 refineries. I don't think any refinery is Euro specific. I don't think our specs meet the international standards. When the situation is this, how would you implement this carbon levy?
Sorry. Yeah, if I can request, Atif Saab, if you would like to sort of briefly respond to the questions. It's again, fully understanding you don't sort of represent the refinery part, but yeah, if you would like to sort of add to anything to this point, please.
Yes, this is exactly what we are saying, that there are issues in implementing this carbon tax. It's a premature, in fact, and there's a lot of homework needs to be done before implementing it. So I fully agree that there are challenges at the policy front, so we need to first overcome those challenges.
Welcome, Honorable Justice Mansoor Shah Saab to the table as well. So yeah, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Yes, Zainab, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's one aspect that has been discussed and that needs to be taken into account here. It's a comment that no matter Pakistan implies carbon levy, carbon tax now or after two years, but the other regions, European regions, they have come up with regulations, whether you call it CBAM, ESPR, EU Eco Design. So I think on a starting point, we need to consider certain aspects. For example, how we go about reporting mechanisms, how we go about ensuring the carbon emissions are meeting a trajectory, and how about setting up a baseline around, how much carbon emissions should be allowed in context of any particular industry. Of course, the standard cannot be same for all the industries, all the private sector, but at least some standardization should be there so that they meet those standards in your country first, and then if they're engaging in export side with other regions, so they don't have to be, it must not become complicated for them there.
Thank you for that comment, Zainab. Yeah, if you have any further follow-up questions, I believe, Salim, there's a question at the back, if you can sort of pass the mic on. Zainab and the team, please. Yeah, go ahead. And please do mention again the speaker you would like to sort of respond to. Thank you.
Hi, I would like to answer that you've mentioned that tax are important. I would like to know from government's perspective that how government sees that this will be applicable and how the consumer will be responding to that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I believe this has been partly addressed, but yeah, Ali Kamal Sahib, if you would like to sort of very briefly respond to this, please. Thank you.
बेटा चाय पे बताता हूँ. So it's a difficult thing. It is not an easy thing, as Atif Saab already mentioned. Everything which is new, it has to be started through from a legal side, then process and institution side, and then it comes onto the market side with a caveat, with a point that how should the private sector respond to it? How should the consumer respond to it? Because in a partial equilibrium analysis, we always say that half of the goes to the government and half of the goes to the consumer, or the government to the producers, and the half of the cost goes to the consumers. But there is a deadweight loss, there is an efficiency loss as well. So everything needs to be taken care. But the main thing is whether we are going to stop emissions or not. Yes, we are going to. So the carbon tax is a reality, and initially phase-wise, but it will be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, sir. If there's no last question, yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. So with this, let me thank you everyone for such a wonderful discussion. And but before we close, we're very again pleased to have with us the Chief Guest, Honorable Justice Mansoor Ali Shah from Supreme Court of Pakistan. Sir, thank you so much for joining us and your wonderful support to the whole climate action in Pakistan. So with this, I'll request you to please, if you can join us at the podium for your keynote addresses also. Thank you so much. Yeah, Dr.
But if you can give the summary.
Yes, sure. So I believe just a second. I'll request Zainab has noted some points to very quickly summarize the discussion, and then I will hand it over to just please.
Thank you so much. So very quickly, there's been a discussion around carbon tax, and perspectives were taken from development partners, private sector, and the different public sector representatives as well. So the question here is, because we are moving towards climate neutrality, and that's a global agenda, and Pakistan has ratified agreement. So why are we, how we go about reducing the carbon emissions? So one of the aspect is carbon tax. Through technical presentation by Dr. Khalid Waleed, different business as usual scenarios have been discussed, and different taxation scenarios have been discussed on, how it can impact the consumers eventually. But then systematically, if it gets applied, Pakistan will get its benefits, whether you call it carbon levy or whether you call it, climate tax related terminology for this. So industrial decarbonization strategy needs to be related with, climate neutrality aspect of Pakistan that we have committed so far. And then there was also a suggestion of implementing it in different phases, a phase-wise approach on, starting with voluntary aspect, and then applying the compliance side of it, and then moving towards it, how it is eventually going to impact the GDP. But then from private sector perspective, if you do not provide them with incentives, why would they think about moving towards carbon tax? So we ultimately do not have to destroy the industries, right? So in that perspective, there has to be some middle approach. And then there was a discussion around Uran Pakistan as well, how we have a CBAM coming up from the European region side, and it's taxing the export sector. So how we can link this aspect with the Uran Pakistan approach that we see Pakistan in next few years, the vision that we have. So there have been general suggestions. Through this platform, we are not advocating for, that this tax should be implemented. Rather, we are going through the pros and cons and how we should move towards the ultimate goal, which is climate action. Thank you.
So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you to UNDP, to SDPI, and to the Dutch Embassy for inviting me. I also understand that the time frame is rather limited. I don't see a watch here, so I don't know how to time myself, because I don't want to come between iftar and affect that. So would anybody indicate, I'm trying to finish it quickly, but so what I want to do today is I'll probably bring in, I haven't heard the others, but I just heard the summary. My perspective is slightly, coming from a judge's perspective, and it's kind of grounded in the Constitution of Pakistan and the fundamental rights and all that. In that background, would I be saying a few things, and I'll be actually critiquing the fact that there should be a carbon tax at all, or there's carbon markets, the relevance of it to Pakistan in that context. So just another dimension maybe. I'm no expert in climate, but what cases that we see and what we see at the courts, it's in that kind of background that I want to talk about. So Pakistan stands at a critical juncture, as we understand. Though we contribute less than 1% to the global emissions, we are amongst the nations most brutalized by climate change. And I want to stress that because what I'm going to say is related to that. So I wish to outline that Pakistan's survival depends on placing adaptation at the heart of our climate strategy. And global tools like carbon markets and carbon taxation must evolve to reflect this urgency. Unless adaptation is at the heart of it, if we're dealing with mitigation only, we might be missing the bus. The critical question is, do these market-based tools truly support climate finance for adaptation? Or do they reinforce a mitigation-centric approach that neglects local realities? So mitigation and adaptation, there is hardly any dichotomy, and I want to underline that also coming from a country from global south. So global climate discourse initially prioritized mitigation, reducing emissions to slow climate change. However, as climate impacts became unavoidable, adaptation emerged as an equally crucial pillar. So the Paris Agreement Article 7 formally recognized this, yet financial flows remain overwhelmingly skewed towards mitigation. For Pakistan, a country facing floods, heat waves, and glacial melt, adaptation is not a secondary concern, but a precondition for economic and social stability. We must not blindly adopt policies designed for the global north. but instead forge a path that prioritizes our own needs, our people, and our future. The stakes are too high for us to gamble on market solutions that do not serve us. We must advocate for climate justice, push for direct financial support, and build a resilient future on our own terms. And let me explain. When we look at Pakistan's climate challenges, we see extreme weather, and I'll cut it short. We all know about the floods of 2022, the deadly heat waves, the water scarcity, erratic monsoon and vanishing glaciers threaten our lifeline. The collapsing infrastructure, climate disasters cost us about $30 billion in the last decade alone. Hunger and disease, crop failures, and heat-linked illness relating to millions. So these are our critical challenges of climate change that we need to address, and the entire strategy needs to be around that for Pakistan. So these are not distant threats. They are here and they are here now. So number one, adaptation first is the critical point that I want to make. The bridge to sustainable mitigation. We can't just think of mitigation alone without adaptation. They're all interlinked. There is a very deep intersection. Some argue that cutting emissions alone will save us. But in Pakistan, adaptation is not a choice. It is the foundation for any meaningful mitigation. Why adaptation must lead? Because if farms drown in floods or factories shut down due to heat waves, how can we transition to green energy or sustainable practices? Damaged infrastructure forces rebuilds with carbon-intensive materials, increasing emissions. Without adaptation, mitigation becomes a luxury we cannot afford. So that's the point one. Number two, adaptation enables mitigation, actually. For example, climate-smart agriculture reduces water use, which is adaptation, while cutting methane from rice paddies, which is mitigation. So trying to explain that I think mitigation and adaptation are like concepts together. We need to understand them in that context. Mangrove restoration shields coasts from storms, which is adaptation, while absorbing CO2s, which is mitigation. So that's one. The second is the flaw in the global tools of carbon markets and taxation, to my mind, is that carbon markets and taxes were designed for mitigation. But for Pakistan, they risk becoming burdens unless tied to adaptation. Carbon markets today's credit rewards emission cuts, but ignores investments in resilience. A textile factory reducing emissions earns credits, but if it's destroyed by floods next year, what good are those credits? Carbon taxation. A tax on emissions could fund adaptation, but only if revenues are ring-fenced for it. Or otherwise, it's just another levy on industries already reeling from climate shocks. The truth, these tools will fail Pakistan unless restructured to value adaptation. That's the point that I wanted to make. When we look at CBAM, why adaptation is non-negotiable for trade. So the EU's carbon border adaptation mechanism, CBAM, will tax emissions embedded in exports like steel and textiles, etc., to compete. Pakistan industries must adapt renewable energy, but also build flood-resilient factories and drought-proof supply chains. Because you can't just simply talk about mitigation alone. Without adaptation, CBAM compliance is impossible. A textile plant powered by solar energy still collapses if inundated by floods. The case for adaptation credits. I mean, let's talk about adaptation credits also. If the world rewards emission cuts, why not resilience? Adaptation credits could fund drought-resistant crops in Sindh, heat wave shelters in Karachi, urban forests to counter Lahore's toxic air. These projects save lives and reduce long-term emissions. Pakistan must lead the charge for their recognition under the Paris Agreement. Carbon taxation was a tool for resilience. A carbon tax can work for Pakistan if its revenue fuels adaptation. Example, South Africa directs 10% of its carbon tax to climate resilience. Our model allocates 70% of revenues to a national climate resilience fund for projects like early warning systems and mangrove revival. This transforms taxation from a penalty into an investment in future. Learning from global pioneers, We're not alone in this fight if we were to go about adaptation. Colombia ties carbon tax funds to forest conservation and watershed projects. Indonesia's new carbon market rules integrate mangrove restoration. Bangladesh prioritizes adaptation in climate fiscal framework. So these nations prove that climate tools can and must serve local realities. I want to repeatedly underline, and I see that every day coming to court, that adaptation is our immediate worry, and we must not lose focus while going for carbon markets or going for carbon taxation, lose out on adaptation and just focus on mitigation, which is actually the agenda of the North, not our problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan's message to the world is clear, to my mind, to global institutions, recognize adaptation credits, reform carbon markets to value resilience, to our industries, invest in adaptation now or pay far more later. To our government, legislate that every rupee from carbon pricing funds adaptation. The world must recognize that climate justice is not about creating more markets. It is about ensuring that those who created the crisis pay their fair share in repairing the damage. Pakistan needs direct climate finance, not market-driven solutions that delay real action. In Pakistan, the choice is not between mitigation and adaptation. It is between survival and surrender. Let's choose survival. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Justice Mansoor. And I believe that was the perfect closing to this. With this, the discussion today has come to an end. And once again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us today, especially during the Ramzan. We believe having this wonderful discussion will shortly be sort of summarizing all the key findings and getting back to you with the recommendations coming out of this platforms for your further input. So with this, we'll be closing it. And I believe we still have roughly around like 15 minutes before the official start time of iftar. And I believe it's that, if I'm not wrong, just to sort of admin to guide itself of the both ends, you can sort of move in the peace manner and bring things to your table. So yeah, thank you so much once again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.